voted in favor of giving the Presidential Commission subpoena power. They understand how important that is, because this commission begins their investigation in the next few weeks. This should not be a partisan issue. I don't understand why my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are turning this into a partisan issue. I find it unbelievable that after everything the people of the Gulf region have endured, and that this entire country has witnessed for over 2 months now, that anyone is still standing with the oil company that caused this disaster instead of the victims who are suffering from it.
I hope the American people understand that this is a clear contrast between who stands on your side and who stands on the side of special interests. How is it possible that members of this chamber find it difficult when the House of Representatives, in a near unanimous vote, could say that the subpoena power is necessary for the commission to be able to get to the bottom of what happened, could pass unanimously there, save for one vote, and yet cannot even proceed here? Cannot even proceed here. This isn't rocket science. It's common sense to most Americans. We need to fully learn the lessons of this disaster with a thorough investigation, not protect oil companies from having their negligence exposed. We need to get answers from BP and Transocean and Halliburton and everyone else, including the federal agencies. Not give apologies to them, as I have seen Republicans suggest that we should apologize to BP for making sure that the residents of the Gulf region are held whole. We need to know the truth, and the commission needs the power to get the truth. So who are you protecting? And what are we hiding here?
What you've seen there is prima facie evidence that the US is a fascist country. It is controlled by the corporations. BP are so powerful, they have effectively got control of sufficient members of the Republican Party in the Senate to overrule the request to give the power of subpoena to the Gulf Coast hearing, thereby absolutely ensuring that nobody ever gets to the root cause. And that's why they now somebody's turned their attention on me, because I've been trying to raise the profile of Bob Kaluza and get people to realise that this is a smoking gun. I'm not suggesting for one moment that Kaluza was the guy who dreamed up the project. He was the guy put on the rig to make it happen. And I've explained all of that detail. Now there's another guy who also saw what I saw, this guy Matthew Simmons. He's a former investment banker in the oil industry. He was very well renowned amongst the peakers, those who believe that there is such a thing called peak oil, i.e. that we're in the process of running out. Because up until 2008, this guy was one of the prime proponents of the peak oil hypothesis. But in 2008, when the price ramped up to $147 a barrel in the June of 2008, and then it tanked to $35 a barrel, I think Matthew Simmons actually came to the realization that the whole peak oil myth was simply a construct of big oil to create the perception of artificial scarcity. And in fact, it wasn't a reality in any way, shape or form. At that point, he actually left the oil industry and he set up a company called the Ocean Energy Institute. And the objective of Ocean Energy Institute was to build wind farms off the coast of Maine. And his game plan was to power the whole of Maine by wind by the year 2020. So he went from being really a big, not just a friend, but a major proponent in the oil industry to effectively almost being an enemy of the oil industry. And right from the outset of the BP disaster, this guy was extremely outspoken in the US. Because of his background, he was getting a lot of airtime on MSNBC and CNN, and he's basically out there saying, this is outrageous. BP are not really making any effort to cap this well. And the cleanup operation is pathetic. It's just a charade. Very, very outspoken guy. And after July 23rd, when all the shipping had been cleared from the Gulf because Tropical Storm Bonnie was supposedly coming through, But before Tropical Storm Bonnie had come through, of course all the shipping was taken out of the Gulf, and all of the cameras, all of these remote cameras that were on the well, showing the world this gushing plume of oil coming out of the well that had blown out. Before the shipping returned, somehow BP claimed to have capped the well. And Matthew Simmons was straight on US TV saying it's a lie. It's a complete lie. They haven't capped the well. How could they cap the well when there was no other shipping in the Gulf? You know, put two and two together. Well, then Matthew Simmons came up with another remarkable observation, because what he discovered was that the Lambda coordinates are the ones in the black rings here, the black boxes, is like the equivalent of the GPS location of the camera. And what Matt Simmons spotted was that the Lambda coordinates before July 23rd were on well location B, which is the well on the right-hand side of that page, which is correct. But after the 23rd, all of a sudden, BP was saying the well has been capped, it's all over, problem resolved. But Matt Simmons, being a very astute observer that he was, he said, hang on a second, it's not the well. They're not showing us the well that had blown out. They're showing us another well. They're showing us a well that had actually been shut in back in February. And he said, see, it's another lie. It's a deception. BP haven't shut the well down at all. They've got the cameras on a well that they shut in a long time ago. Therefore, the well is still leaking. Then on August the 8th, "67-year-old Matthew Simmons, no previous health issues. He's in his hot tub, on his own, at home in Maine." This is an outside hot tub. At his home in Maine, and his family come out there and they find him dead in a hot tub. He's not the only one. There's a number of people. One of the guys, a guy called Jim Black, who was responsible for the early stages of the clean-up operation, and Jim Black was about to blow the whistle as well. He was making some of the observations that he wasn't being provided with the resources he needed by BP to do the clean-up operation. So he was given the responsibility, not given the resources, and of course he felt that he was going to be the fall guy. Well, he died in a plane accident, flying in his plane from Texas to Florida. So there's something really not right here. Matt Simmons was also, of course, very, very outspoken about the amount of Corexit that was pumped into the Gulf of Mexico. Corexit is an extremely toxic dispersant that was pumped into the oil to break up the oil and sink it from the surface. Now, why did BP want to do that? Because under US federal law, BP's liability, or any oil company's liability, is based on the visible slick. The visible slick. So obviously somebody in their legal department came up with a bright idea that if they could make the slick invisible, then they could reduce their liability. So because how do we make the slick invisible? I know, we'll sink it. And this is what Corexit does. It sinks the slick. So what it's done is it's created this dead zone in the Gulf because this slick is no longer coming to the surface. It's much more spread out. In fact, the actual surface area equivalent of the slick is much greater than it would have been if it was on the surface. And of course, the great tragedy as well is if the oil was on the surface, it's a lot easier to clean up than if it's lying at some sub-sea level. But we also know, although we suspected, but we also know, thanks to, I think it was a Channel 4 documentary, and this is Stephen Fry talking to a guy called Mike Utzler, in the next slide. Mike Utzler was a microbiologist who was working with the clean-up team in the Gulf. And what you see is a very, very short clip of Stephen Fry interviewing Mike Utzler. Now, Stephen Fry obviously has exactly no idea what he's really hearing here. I mean, he's just a sort of guy, to draw in the viewers. But listen very, very carefully to what Mike Utzler here is saying to Stephen Fry.
The plume is actually disappearing. The plume is being biodegraded, that there is a new form of microbiology that is attacking this plume and using it as a food source.
Just to bring it back to you. Okay, thank you.
That is Mike Kutzler, without any pressure on him, because Stephen Fry certainly isn't an interviewer of any great caliber. Mike Kutzler is volunteering that there is a new form of microbiology that has been put into the slick to help consume the slick. So this is the admission that there is genetically modified microbiology that has been put into the Gulf. And if you want to have a look at what this is doing, go Google blue plague. Blue plague. The guy that's named it blue plague is a guy called Michael Edward. He's a researcher and a natural health practitioner in South Florida. And he's called it blue plague because that's what it does, it turns you blue. And of course it's BP, blue plague BP as well. So. But you have a look, this is a nasty, nasty piece of microbiology, and it doesn't affect everybody. And at first, what we were seeing symptoms which was effectively a flesh-eating bacteria. And everybody thought it was just Vibrio vulnificus, which is a naturally occurring bacteria that lives in brackish water. And if you have a weakened immune system and it gets into a cut or whatever, then it literally can be fatal very, very quickly. But after that interview, that was the prima facie evidence that this isn't Vibrio vulnificus. It's a genetically modified microbiology. And microbiologists have tried to raise awareness of the fact that the Gulf of Mexico has become an unmitigated experiment. Why is this important? It's very important. Anybody who, of course, is in the Gulf of Mexico area and tries to sort of share their experiences, if they don't get bumped off, they get the benefit of BP's behavioural health payments, which is the euphemism for hush money. So if you're in the Gulf Coast area and it looks like you're going to sort of make a bit of a nuisance of yourself by flagging up some of the problems in the area, you get a visit from BP's representatives and they basically say how much. And that's why guys like Michael Edward and a handful of others are so important, because they're basically telling BP we're not interested. We're just not interested. And they know the risks. They know the risks, but they want to try, and it's an uphill battle, but they want to try and expose the magnitude of what's occurring. Now this is the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico, if you wanted to poison the planet, there is no better place to start than the Gulf of Mexico. Because the Gulf Stream isn't called the Gulf Stream for nothing. The Gulf Stream originates effectively in the Gulf of Mexico. Swirls around the Gulf of Mexico, comes down around the southern tip of Florida, and then literally up the southeastern coast of the United States, up to the Carolina Bumps, where it starts to make its way across the North Atlantic to Europe. And many of the symptoms that we have seen in the Gulf of Mexico area between basically about May of last year, and we're still seeing, but we started in May. Do you remember this? This is Missouri a couple of 3 or 4 months ago. Missouri had these massive storms, these massive tornadoes. Now a normal tornado, I mean they're incredibly devastating, but the footprint of a normal tornado isn't much more than probably 50, 60 yards or so. But these tornadoes have footprints of half a mile. And with them was coming torrential rainfall. And in the aftermath of these tornadoes, all of a sudden, in these areas, we were seeing the same symptoms as in the Gulf of Mexico area. You know, we just had Hurricane Irene go across the northwestern United States. You know, it was pretty breezy here over the last few days. That was the tail end of Hurricane Irene. Hurricane Irene started just to the southeast of Cuba, worked its way north of Cuba, looked as though it was going to go across Florida, and then it turned. It turned and it literally came up the southeastern United States, up the coastline, sucking up all the stuff that come out of the Gulf of Mexico and was in the Gulf Stream there. And it's, of course, just been deposited on the northeastern United States by Hurricane Irene. So I'm not exactly going to be falling off my chair in shock, horror, or disbelief if in 2 or 3 months we're starting to get reports